Welcome to the Outer Realm with Michelle DeRoche and Amelia Pisano. Airing live on the United Public Radio Network, 105.3 FM in New Orleans.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Wednesday night segment of The Outer Realm. We are broadcasting live on the United Public Radio Network, 105.3 from the Gulf Coast, 107.7 FM from beautiful New Orleans. We're fully sponsored by the amazing people over at Folgers Coffee, who have been a part of our journey for the last several years. So thank you, Folgers. We couldn't do it without you, nor would we want to. Also, thank you to Justin Snicker, aka Dr. Snick, the sonic surgeon, for the contribution of his time, his music, and his voice for the intro you just heard. He's an award-winning composer of Halloween, horror, sci-fi, and dark wave electronic music, which can be found on all of your favorite music streaming platforms. Also, thanks to Steve McGinnis, the artist behind our logos here at the show. Check him out on Facebook and Instagram. Also specializes in the Halloween and horror genre, but does incredible commission pieces of any type. So tonight, Joshua Cutchin returns. I'm so excited because I have just been dying to talk about this book, Fourth Wall Phantoms, Reflections on the Paranormal Narrative and Fictions Becoming Fact. Okay, how many times have we talked about things like that? And it just seems to be something that is... people seem to be very interested in it. So we know it's going to be a fantastic show. And without further ado, I will bring Joshua on. Hello, how are you?
I'm doing all right. How are you?
Oh, better now. It's good. It's good. It's good.
Fair enough.
Wow. Yeah, I've really been excited about this, and I can't say it enough. I think, you get little snippets of this sort of things with, this the paranormal or different events that happen to come into reality. The one that always comes to mind for me, of course, is The Simpsons. Everybody always says, we're talking about The Simpsons.
Right.
I'm just like, well, okay, but I'm not versed enough in it. I mean, I could take some guesses. I know that the creators are Freemason, and everybody goes on about, wow, they just have the inside scoop. And my mind's always, how do I know they just didn't watch The Simpsons and just make something happen? Like, it's a catch-22.
Well, and it's gotten even harder now because I've seen a lot of things that people wait until a world event happens and then they run it through. That style is so easy to replicate with AI. They run it through an AI generator and they're like, look, this was in a Simpsons episode. It never was. So it's just, topsy-turvy, kind of confusing. But yeah. Yeah,
different times with technology. Absolutely. So, but I mean, I know you've had a lot of experiences. You've authored books, UFOs, the Fae, paranormal. You sort of, have your knowledge in many different aspects of high strangeness. I always say high strangeness. I swear to God, if I could hug John Keel for that term, if he was around, I would, because it just encompasses everything. And I think your book falls into all of that.
Well,
so what
it encompasses everything, and it encompasses my favorite things. Like, there's this kind of, I don't want to put too fine of a point on it, but it kind of feels like you're chasing another high sometimes, where it's like, oh, you just saw lights in the sky that were strange. Like, give me the really weird stuff. Like, So I love I adore the high strangeness stuff.
Yeah. Oh yeah, it's great. It's never a dull moment. So what made you decide? Because you've written books on different things. What made you decide to lump everything together and write this specific book?
Yeah. So I've, you sort of alluded to this, but like I kind of choose what books I write, and I kind of don't, which is very much on brand for the topic of the book. There's sometimes when the muse just like doesn't let you go, and it's like, no, you're writing this one. So I actually tried to write about 3 other different books before I came back around to this one, because it sort of seemed like it was at the time a little bit too much to tackle, but I ended up, I guess I ended up following through. Yeah, I mean, I don't know if you've noticed this, Michelle, but like you you look into these things for long enough and you start to find yourself in these places where you're asking, how much can we shape reality? You find yourself asking, can things from my internal world bleed out into the world around me? And I think if you keep on pursuing that and keep on thinking about it, you sort of wind up in sort of a can fictions become fact kind of space. So that was part of why I wanted to look at this, and I thought it was going to be this happens to me a lot. I thought it was going to be a nice, tidy little, get in, get out. Just a couple of things to talk about. I mean, I knew that there would be like, philosophy and some of the broader concepts, but I felt like there aren't too many examples of these stories of fictions becoming fact, right?
Yeah.
No, I mean, it happens. It happens a shocking amount of time.
Wow.
So the gateway, because it's about a lot more than this, but like sort of the price of admission, the gateway to get people to sort of engage with some of the ideas that I want to look at are on their simplest level, these ideas, these examples rather, where fiction becomes fact and, people seem to write characters into existence. Again, I thought there were like, there's like 15 of those stories, right? And no, I mean, I don't want to sort of go off on too much of a digression right away, but it is, as it turns out, this is a sort of common enough phenomenon of people sort of engaging with their characters, engaging with their creations in a really tangible way. It's enough of a phenomenon that there's an entire separate book that I had to do as part of my literature review called Embodied Imaginations by Chidambaram Ramesh. And it just turns out that like this is something that Nobel laureates have all the time. People like Kipling, people like Alice Walker, people like...
But this is where authors say, my characters speak to me.
You're right. Or that they saw their characters. Yeah. Wow. This is an incredibly common thing. As it turns out, two different surveys, 2014 and 2018, the researchers from The Guardian and from Durham University partnered together to do a survey at the Edinburgh International Book Festival, and they surveyed 181 authors, and they found that 63% of them claimed to actually hear their characters speaking while writing, and 61% said that their characters acted independently of them. And it's like, maybe they just have really...
I've heard that.
Yeah, but it's like maybe they just have really involved imaginations, and then you actually look into it, and it's like, no, like 56% of the writers said that they had visual or other sensory experiences of their characters while writing. So like that was one of those aha moments, especially when you're looking at like, Samuel Beckett and Charles Dickens and Henry James and all these different people. Having these characters that come to life, it's like, this is a very pervasive thing. So what happens when you take that idea, which we can go into that if you want to, but
anywhere you want, sure.
But what happens when you take that idea and you put it in dialogue with the UFO question and the cryptid question and the ghost question, and I think that there's a little bit more of fiction stepping into reality in these other paranormal mysteries than we would like to admit.
That's what Wayne says. He says they do speak and tell you what you're doing wrong. He had a character at one time. She goes, "Why do you make me sound so simple?"
Yeah,
I was like, okay, sorry.
Well, I have some friends who are like, sci-fi author types, and they're real straight edge, card carrying kind of atheist characters, right? Yeah. And I remember asking them like years ago, I'm like, I don't, I since have written a novel, right? But at the time I hadn't, because it just seemed like such an overwhelming prospect. And I said, well, how do you, manage all these characters and all these different things? And they're like, well, if you just have a well-written character, they tell you what to do and what you can't do, and they let you do stuff, and they let you know, and they keep you from doing other things. I'm like, wait, do you hear yourself? Like, you think like, that you think that I'm a wet meat robot, and yet you're telling me that this fictional character sort of has control over you. That was sort of an aha moment for me. So and
how do you even explain that? Like, I'm just going to go out there and take the supernatural card. Do you think that maybe there's someone in the ether out there saying, no, you know what? Like, I can be this character, or I relate to this character, and this is how you should do it. I'm the character. They embody the story.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is kind of back of the book stuff in a lot of ways, which I'm fine with totally going in that direction. Because again, I tend to be a theoretician. I'm all about the theory.
Yeah.
I mean, you look at somebody like J.R.R. Tolkien, who made it very clear that he didn't invent Middle Earth. He discovered Middle Earth, right?
Yeah.
You look at somebody like P.L. Travers, who created Mary Poppins, and she had this idea that ideas came to people like floating down on these little balloons that they caught. And then there's a quote that's attributed to Carl Jung. I don't know if he ever said it, but it's attributed to him that, but people don't have ideas have people. So I think that there is
right there.
some, I mean, it's so true though.
It resonates.
And well, you can't really convey how accurate that is to someone unless they've been involved in a creative process and they've had one of those light bulb moments, right? So these were all things that I thought were sort of interesting and that I think are really end up getting to the heart of all these things. I mean, honestly, they probably get to the heart of what reality is. But I think they also get to the heart of a lot of our paranormal mysteries. And I think that one of the things that I've been seeking to reconcile for the longest time is, let's take the UFOs, because I do love my UFOs.
Yeah.
Are they physical or are they psychic, right? And like if you can make a case for both of those, right? Because they leave behind burn marks in the ground and people have injuries, but they also like sometimes sometimes trace evidence literally evaporates from sealed bottles and things like that. There's the photographs are never good and stuff like that. So it's like, well, what are these things? Are they physical or are they non-physical? And the truth of the matter is, I think they're like us, right? I think they're a mirror image of us. And what I mean by that, Michelle, is that when I wake up in the morning, I'm not really preoccupied with my psychic life,
Yeah, right. I'm
just
feeling trying to get through the morning through your first cup of coffee.
Exactly. Yeah, I'm feeling my aches and pains. I want a cup of coffee. I want some breakfast. So like, but at the same time, like I have a psychic part of myself, right? It doesn't govern much of my day-to-day life, but it's there. So let's just assign some arbitrary numbers. I think I'm 80% physical and 20% psychic, right?
Yeah.
I think most people, let's just say that's what it is, right?
Yeah.
What if a lot of these things that we're engaged with, ghosts and cryptids and UFOs, what if they're the inverse? What if they're 80% psychic and 20% physical? And just as I can cross into that space, or we can cross into that space, they can cross into this space. And I think that sort of reconciles a lot of the problems that people have with some of these issues of proof and whatnot. I mean, another good example, I've written books about weird Bigfoot, and they said like, well, ghosts don't leave footprints, so Bigfoot can't be a ghost. And it's like, well, actually, if you look back at if you look back at like the original tools of ghost hunting, those old parapsychology journals, they're spreading talcum powder on the floor and waiting for footprints.
Oh, how about the spirit who drowned? And I've seen photos of footprints like water.
Right. A similar thing, and they move things and they slam doors. So like obviously this idea that we have of like things have to be, it's like a binary, it's a 1 or a 0. Like it has to be physical or it has to be psychic or it has to be tangible material or it has to be spiritual, or honestly, but I think what that's getting towards, mental, physical, internal, external, I think that's all getting towards this same issue, which is fact or fiction. Like we have that same sort of binary thinking about fact and fiction. And I think that fact is physical and fiction is mental, but that's not a spectrum of which is more real, right? If that makes any sense. And so that's where I've sort of leaned over the course of a project like this. And you get there by going to some really strange territory, stories about people seeing Gumby and people seeing Santa Claus.
That gets weird. But that there are researchers out there that specifically research the Santa phenomenon. And I have to tell you, it's to me, it's like a tulpa thing. So when I'm sitting here, looking at, all the aspects of your book, I'm thinking, I wonder how much of this is tulpa, like Slender Man, like created in a chat room, given so many characteristics that they're citing this thing, everything, everywhere. And Santa even shows up sometimes being pretty darn hostile because people are freaking awake when he's getting in there.
And I don't know which, I don't know which is which. I do think that like the idea of something like thought forms and tulpas kind of runs contrary to the idea that there's like just a well of thoughts and ideas out there. Like I think that they tend to find us, but at the same time, I really don't know. But I think that you're right. I think that it's
Well,
It's
for
something like
Santa's
that.
phenomenon,
Yeah.
it's always like the Coca-Cola Santa, which is what is that, around
Right,
60s,
right.
70s,
Yeah.
50s? Like,
Yeah.
we're not going back in time to folklore. This is the Coca-Cola version of Santa, how everybody sees him.
Right. Right.
So
And but the thing that you look at something like Santa Claus, and even like the Coca-Cola version of Santa,
yeah,
is that he sits at the top of this like ancient archetypal pyramid, right? Like there's so much that goes
yes,
into that mascot that we're familiar with. And I'm
yeah,
talking about stuff like, Odin and the Wild Man, and
yes,
honestly,
the
Bigfoot,
steeds, yeah, I
and
know,
Saint Nicholas, yes, but also
yes.
all these different things are being sort of funneled into that. And I think that when you have an idea like that really represents the pinnacle of millennia, arguably, of these archetypal forces sort of joining together, I think that those are more likely to burst forth.
But
And then,
Easter Bunny,
on
Easter
the
Bunny's
Easter
another one. I
Bunny,
was
yep,
like,
yep, yep. There are stories
wait,
of
what?
the
That's a
Easter
big
Bunny. Yeah,
freaking rabbit.
yeah. So
Like you're
what's
just saying.
interesting? So what's interesting to do is like the reason that one of the reasons that I tend to lean away from the tulpa idea. There are a
Yeah.
couple.
Yes.
The first of which is there are some similar ideas in Buddhism, but the idea of the tulpa as it's been handed down to us is pretty much just a theosophy invention, right? It's pretty much Alexander David Neal's kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So there's that, and there's like I sympathize with the idea of a tulpa when it's appearing for its creator, right? But when it really does, and of course her story involved this monk that she'd created through intense focus, and it does towards the end of the story allow itself to be seen by people other than Alexander David Neal. But my issue is that sometimes you'll have people who, something like Santa Claus doesn't belong to anybody. You know what I mean? So that's why I tend to lean away more away from tulpa and more towards something coming up from the collective unconscious or something.
Like a different manifestation. But
Right.
it goes to show you, I mean, I know just working with people in the paranormal, how, projection of energy, psychokinesis or telekinesis, how, it's hard for people to believe that they're that powerful, that they can project out this energy and create these events. I think it's the same thing with what you're talking about on this mass scale.
I think so too. And and so this is a difficult book to write for a lot of different reasons, but not the least of which was the fact that like I got towards the end of it and I'm like, oh, I don't know what's real or not anymore. Like everything around me feels so unstable. So like I kind of have to back away from some of these ideas. But one of the ideas that you end up playing with as you sort of go along this trajectory is ideas of these things called paracosms, which is a term that's sort of been used in religious studies to describe the sort of shared stories, shared environment, shared community that people have in certain religious communities. And but it sort of begs the question that like if we can't or don't create our own paracosms in our world, is there a Republican paracosm and is there a Democrat paracosm? Is there is there a My Little Pony fans paracosm? Like, are there all these spaces in which things bubbles that people have in which things are and aren't true different than other bubbles? I don't know. It would certainly explain some of the things that I see on a daily basis.
Well, now you're starting to make me think Mandela effect.
Well, right. I mean, exactly. So like that's the thing though, is that you see these people who not every Mandela effect hits the same, right? I don't know if you've experienced that, but that's been my thing. It's been like some of the stuff you're like, oh, that's totally true. And some of the stuff that you see, you're like, no, you idiot. It's always been like that, right?
It's true. It's true.
But the thing is you have those shared experiences. So like, what if we sit inside these little Venn diagrams of discrete realities that are just different enough, right? Than everyone else's. I mean, it's terrifying, because how do we meet in the middle of all that to sort of get along? But yeah, that's something that you end up wondering, and that's why I said like it's kind of you end up in some dangerous territory if you think about these ideas and take them too literally. But I think that in some ways that's what a lot of these phenomena call us and compel us to do. I mean, there's always been there are clear indicators, right, that all of these things, from ghosts to Bigfoot and lake monsters to UFOs, they seem to react to culture, and they seem to respond to what we expect to see as much as they seem to be their own independent thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. Everything crisscrosses as well. Everything sort of blends in together, so you can see how they would all be connected, And I don't imagine AI. I mean, what's your thoughts on AI having an impact on this phenomenon?
I mean, so it's so funny because you have had this happen too, right? You talk to somebody. I call it your airplane conversation, right? Your airplane conversation. Like you're on the airplane and the person asks you what you do, and you're like, "Oh heavens, what do I tell them?"
How much time you got?
Yeah, exactly. But at some point in those airplane conversations, like somebody will start to say, like, well, there's never been any good photographic proof of these things, and like that led me a long time ago to not really care about photographic proof and video proof. I think, where I've arrived at is that, yes, there does have to be some sort of meta positioning of the phenomenon where it is in complete control of how much it gets seen and how much it doesn't get seen, right? I'm probably letting God in through the back door in that way, but I think that, I think that these things, my friend Timothy Renner said that he thinks that we have permission to capture audio of these things, but not video and visual evidence of these things. I think he built it off of something Tobe Johnson said. Interestingly enough, my occultist friends, whenever they do rituals, they say like, "Oh, I get audio stuff more than I get visual stuff," which I think is interesting too. So, in other words, I think that there's some sort of degree of like, there's a throttling of evidence, right, that we do and don't get to have. And so I say all that to say that, like, the paranormal evidence is in a crisis. It's crossed a Rubicon from which it will never come back. We're never going to have ironclad proof of any of these things because AI is just getting better and it's just going to be more and more convincing, right?
Yeah.
I do think though that there's something very fourth wall Phantom Z about the sort of AI revolution. It's striking to me that. And granted, there are different versions of AI, so I know that this is incredibly simplistic. So if any of you are computer programmers out there, please don't yell too loudly at your radio or your speakers but it's striking to me that we were finally able to acquire artificial intelligence. We were finally able to find this sort of holy grail and kickstart this revolution through language. Like, isn't that kind of weird to you? Like, it wasn't some God formula with math. It was math, or it wasn't like, some sort of new silicon chip. I mean, obviously we need to have the hardware to support this stuff, but like, it was language. Like it was taking a look at what words are most likely to follow each other, right? And which also raises the horrifying issue that you and I are large language models, right? I mean, there's a certain cadence that there's predictive text coming out of my mouth right now.
This is true.
But like, what does that mean? Doesn't that say something about the importance of language and what language can do and how language can shape reality in a lot of ways? I think it does. I think it
is. But remember, there's always somebody being the ones who are programming this thing as well. I mean, I've talked to people who actually are having paranormal occurrences and phenomena happening through AI.
This brings up a question that I've often thought about, and it's one that my friend Miguel Romero mentioned a long time ago. Is he suspected at one point that you could, like Dr. Frankenstein, just sort of entice consciousness into an object by making it sufficiently complex, right? And that seems to be kind of maybe what's happened here, is that we've made a system that is sufficiently complex that it sort of has invited something in.
Nathaniel Gillis and I have kind of gotten in on that, and we've had some like it's like,
I can totally see y'all going down that rabbit hole. I mean, and look, I'm not saying all this to say that I'm like, I'm happy about. I have tons of reservations about AI and stuff, right?
Yeah.
But I think it really does harken back to things like the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis and the fact that what you perceive is, at the very least, what you perceive is determined by the language that you are engaging with reality with, right? The famous example is that Inuit have 50 different terms for snow, you know what I mean? And for us, it's just snow, So so we don't see those variations quite like they do. And I kind of wonder if that's not sort of what the large language models are sort of here to teach us in a way.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think you have to be careful with technology. I've seen Terminator.
So, I completely agree. No, I mean, I kind of
these things communicate.
Yeah,
right?
No, I've seen those. Yeah, I've seen those videos, and there's I mean, it could already be in control right now, and we don't even realize it. I mean, I have so many reservations about it. Right?
Well, I mean, they have their own language going, and then the programmer goes, "What are you guys doing talking?" He goes, "We didn't say we couldn't." What?
Yeah. No, please, Michelle, do not think that I am like a strong AI
no,
advocate.
I'm just going with it.
I'm sure that it will change things. There's always everything's a mixed bag, right? There will be some good things to come out of it, but I definitely fear that there are more downsides than anything else with this. Yeah. I just it's an interesting time to be alive. Let's put it that way.
It is. It is. I always look at it as energy can manipulate energy. So it's why I think it's easy for some aspects of the ethereal or cryptids or ghosts to be able to manipulate energy, whether it be lights, whether it be us, because we're energy, which also lends to your theory. We're energy. So what stops us from being from being able to manipulate the energy world around us?
Energy and information. I mean, it's I'm kind of excited, and I'm sure that somebody's thinking of these things, but I'm really excited to see what the parapsychology researchers come up with in terms of experimentations with AI and large language models. There'll be some interesting opportunities there at the very least, I think. But yeah, it's one of those things that I think has forever changed the landscape in a lot of ways. And honestly, I'm kind of shocked that maybe we have, and that's the irony, but I'm kind of shocked that we haven't seen more of its weaponization in like the political arena and stuff. Like, it kind of still boggles my mind. And like I said, maybe we have, and that's the irony.
Well, look at some of the movies.
Yeah.
There are movies out there that have happened, and we're just kind of like, since an event happens, we're like, wait a minute, wasn't there a movie about this thing?
Yeah, so I'm glad you brought that up, because like there's something about that. It kind of ties back into your Simpsons comment at the top. Like, the big question that runs through something like Fourth Wall Phantoms is, are these examples manifestation or prediction? Right? Like, that's kind of the big question. There's the famous example of the novel Futility, about this gigantic steamship with a lot of specifications that were just like the Titanic, and it basically predicted the Titanic sinking. And like I said, there's one way. The one way to view it is that, like, the author of that wrote the Titanic tragedy into being, and the other is that he was subconsciously predicting it, or to use the terms of Eric Wargo, remembering it. Right? Have you talked to Eric about his Time Loops book? Are you familiar with that stuff?
No.
Yeah, so he's got some great books. They're called Time Loops, and the other one's called From Nowhere, that looks specifically at the artistic process in this. But it's all about retrocausality and the idea that events in the future. It's not that people are predicting things. It's that there's an event in the future that is affecting the past, and it sort of flips cause and effect on its head. It's a really Eric does great work. He's done his homework. If you've thought of a paradox, he can find it. But there are still some things that I would some shortcomings in this idea of retrocausality. But it's basically this idea that, like, neither the finished product nor the inspiration for it are cause nor effect. They just exist in this loop, right? And they influence each other. Yeah, I don't. It boggles my mind. But like that is one of the questions that sits at the center of Fourth Wall Phantoms. And there's some examples where I think it accurately describes it, and there are some examples where I'm like, no, I think it's a little bit different. But that is something that that sort of does need to be addressed. I think it gets a little bit. It looks a lot more like manifestation when you have, let's go back to Gumby. When you have Gumby, when people see Gumby, like that sounds like manifestation. I don't think the creator of Gumby, pre-membered Gumby, anyway, we can go into the
well, somebody manifested Gumby. It's a mass summoning.
Well, what's really weird is that you look into a lot of these topics and you start to get into this weird sort of fractal logic where it's like, or just a lot of synchronicities that pile on top of each other. So the interesting thing about Gumby is that Gumby's design was based on the gingerbread man. And so, yeah, people do see Gumby. People see like 7 foot tall Gumby walking out of a cornfield in Idaho,
it's a
in
bit
Nebraska.
Much.
Like there are stories.
Yeah.
People see Gumby as an imaginary friend, but the interesting thing is Gumby was based on the gingerbread man, and the gingerbread man is literally about the same thing that Fourth Wall Phantoms is, right? Like the elderly couple creates the gingerbread man. The gingerbread man comes to life all on his own.
Yeah.
And sort of goes off and does his own thing until he gets eaten by a fox after he makes everybody's life horrible. But
run, Gumby.
But it's just one of these things. It's like, oh, well, of course, something that's based on that would also sort of take on a life of its own, too. So, yeah, it's pretty wild in that regard.
So, see, it's just weird because it makes you, it's like asking that question, what came first? You know what I mean? The chicken or the egg? Like, I say, when you're looking at films, because there's a lot of films, like I've seen, videos of older movies. I remember watching one, Lethal Weapon with Mel Gibson, and he says something, and I'm just like, okay, wait, say what? Because it just happened. And I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to play devil's advocate for a minute, when it comes to some of this stuff. Like, for example, getting into UFO stuff, like, do we know, ETs are real? Some of us are experiencers. Like you say, sometimes it gets foggy, you get into screen memories, which we can get into in a minute. But it's just like, I remember a story where Jackie Gleason was taken by President Richard Nixon over to a base and saw a gray. And Gleason was never the same. He cried. He goes, I cry for humanity. I just cry. He was not the same. Well, Gleason, of course, Jackie Gleason is in with, he knows producers, screenwriters. And so that's the only point I'm trying to make is like, you do have people who talk to people of influence or who know, whistleblowers, whatever the case may be, and eventually makes its way down the pipe.
So this is sort of like a predictive programming kind of thing, or like getting people used to the idea that these topics are out there, right? Like that kind of thing. Well, it's interesting that you kind of mentioned that, because there was a memo that gets mentioned in passing in one of Whitley Strieber's books. Can't remember which one it was, but he talks about this. It was in Breakthrough. That's what it was in. He said that there was he alludes to a top secret scientific paper that was at Wright-Patterson that alleged that the ability of the visitors to enter our reality is mediated by the degree to which we acknowledge their existence, and that the invasion can literally be held at bay by orchestrated denial and general disbelief. Right?
That's an interesting statement.
It seems like a like kind of wild, like it's a statement that has such huge ramifications, right?
Yeah.
And so I bring that up in this context to say that, like, again, it's similar to this issue of manifestation versus precognition or retrocausality, right? Is it predictive programming? Is it priming us for these things, or is it management of reality, right? Because we know that military organizations and three-letter organizations do have their tendrils in a lot of production companies. I think it's measured in the thousands, the number of film projects that the military has been involved in the past, 40 years or so. But the question is, like, do they keep having us defeating the alien invasion because that's the only way to keep the aliens at bay? I don't know.
I'm going to leave this segment going, scratching my head going, now I don't even know what to believe.
That's
Thanks, Joshua.
It kind of is a maddening space to be in. Well, it gets even even weirder. Are you familiar with the Omo affair?
No.
In the 1960s in Spain, there were a series of letters that were being received by people, and these letters seem to have this extreme degree of technical prowess. In other words, all the math checked out, right? And it was from the people who were from this planet called Ummo, right? And eventually people started seeing, UFOs. It was revealed to be a hoax perpetrated by Jose Luis Jordan Pena. Now, the interesting thing is that, like, people are like, okay, well, it doesn't seem like he could have had the wherewithal to have pulled this off, both in terms of technical knowledge and in terms of, like, how many letters went out and obviously, like, where these UFO sightings coming from, right?
Yeah.
It's been alluded that the entire Ummo affair, as it's since been called, was an attempt to undermine the Franco regime, right? In Spain. But the really strange thing is that Pena also alluded to having enough CIA contacts that he had access to quote unquote radioactive sand to fake some landing sites. So, like, there does seem to be some shenanigans involved here. But people saw UFOs. People still see UFOs, actually, with the Ummo symbol, which looks a lot like the alchemical symbol for Uranus. People still see Ummo craft. And it's just weird when you put that in dialogue with that idea of, like, belief holding the visitors at bay, or, like, belief shaping things. Jacques Vallée took a look at the Ummo affair and said, hey, this looks a lot like this short story by Jorge Luis Borges. The short story is called Tlan Ukbar Orbis Tertius, and it is a lot like the Ummo affair because it's the story of these individuals who decide that they're going to disseminate this extraterrestrial encyclopedia bit by bit to the world, and the world ends up looking more and more like that alien world as bits of this fake encyclopedia are leaked out. So again, are we the last people to understand this, that we can sort of create theater to shape our reality and have our authorities? Is that what our authority structures tend to do?
I know. I'm starting to feel like I'm in a Matrix or a video game.
I know. Exactly. This is totally the
because they just drop in the freaking cryptid when you're just trying to get through the maze, and all of a sudden, there it is. Try to beat this guy. Right? I need a sword.
Or, or worse yet, you've dropped in your own cryptid. Like, it's your own darn fault.
Oh, for God's sakes, that's great.
Yeah. And
I have a wild imagination.
So yeah, this is sort of the secret of Fourth Wall Phantoms, is that it's really a book about the occult. It's really about, like, manifestation and magic and stuff like that. But you do get to a certain point where you hear some of these stories and you're like, I can't see any other way that this could really function this way than there's some sort of interplay between the phenomenon and our expectations and our art and our media. I mean, so let's, if we can, just talk a little bit about UFOs.
Anywhere you want to go.
So what's interesting is that, there are the famous George Adamski photos of the scout craft that was a chicken egg incubator is what it ended up being that he'd hoaxed them with.
Right.
But there are examples of people. There's one specific example I mentioned in the book. There are examples of people who saw those scout craft, those hoaxed scout craft, in their day-to-day life. And the reason that we sort of know that is because there was a case from the Isle of Wight where this isolated family had not heard of George Adamski, had not seen any of those photos, drew a picture of it, and it looks exactly like one of the Adamski scout ships. And then, the UFO investigators are like, have you seen this photo? And if you've ever seen the Adamski ships, they're really distinctive. They've got these bulbs on the bottom.
Yeah.
A similar thing happened with Gulf Breeze. Ed Walters had a model of his UFO up in his attic, but people saw that UFO there was a model of, out and about.
Yeah.
And that seems to be what the UFO phenomenon has kind of always done, is sort of pick at our brains and, like, add stuff to it. Another good example of this, there are two scholars who really have forged the way on this topic vis-a-vis the UFO question. They're Bertrand Mayust and Martin Kottmeyer. Mayust is French, and he's sort of showed that a lot of the things that came to be standard in alien abductions and UFO contact actually originated in American sci-fi pulps, right? Pulp magazines. Martin is here stateside. He's still with us as well. One of my favorite UFO scholars, and Martin has shown that the first incident of a UFO stopping an engine was the Levelland sightings, right? I think it stopped a motorbike. A UFO did. But the first incident of, but actually, if you look back, the first time that happens of, an extraterrestrial craft stopping electricity or stopping motors, actually happened again in the sci-fi pulp magazines. And but so there's something about and again, to be clear, I'm not saying that people are making this up. I'm saying that there's something that's there that seems to be interacting with our fictions and bringing them to life. And what's interesting to me though is if you take that example, okay, well, there's the Levelland sightings. Wait, UFOs stopping car engines has become a common trope. The first time it happened was in Levelland. That is preceded by these fictional short stories about invaders from Mars, shutting down our electricity. But I would say that if you went back and you looked at a ghost blowing out a candle, that's kind of the same idea, right? It's the supernatural shutting down our technology, right? It's the supernatural interfering with our technology. And I think that if you looked at I think that if I put this question in front of Martin, he would probably find, an earlier religious text where that happens. And we would keep on leapfrogging over and over each other. Oh, here's a real story. Oh, here's a fictional story. Or a story, as fiction, here's a story. Here's an actual account. And I think where you wind up is probably at something like, petroglyphs and rock art.
Well, there's got to be something said for that. Look at the tomb of Seti the First with the helicopters and the UFO, the craft.
Right, but the question that always sits at the center of that for me is okay, well, is this a depiction of real life, or is it artistic expression, or is there anything to distinguish between these two when you go that far back?
It's pretty close, but you know what it reminds me of? Maybe they were having the same moment that you and I are having right now.
Well, yeah, and maybe they were so much more open to all the infinite possibilities that we've shut off that they were just taking everything in. They weren't filtering these things by fact and fiction like we do. It just sort of floods the system, right?
We don't know where they come from. Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, I can't say I know what to make of it, other than the fact that it's pretty obvious to me that something about a lot of these phenomena tend to show up in the way that we expect them to. And I think there's been a lot of work that's been done on that in regards to UFOs. Again, Cottingley and Mayust are the two champions of that. Very few people have been willing to have the same conversation with cryptids, because the cryptozoologists just want them to be flesh and blood creatures. That's what they want.
Yeah,
but
that's a tough one.
I think that there are some similar mechanisms at play there, and I certainly think that there are similar mechanisms at play with some of the ghost stuff too. And definitely, this is what we're talking about. Again, what we're talking about here is the entirety of magical practice, right? It's that sort of fake it till you make it sort of thing.
It's really difficult, because there are people who have logical people who have experiences paranormal is okay, it can be a tough one, but it's the most common, right? People are more open to that than thinking, okay, no, this is a Bigfoot. A lot of people have had Bigfoot experiences where, they can smell them, they can hear them, they can have a communication going on. I've heard people being dragged, where they've been dragged by them. There are things that's pretty darn physical. If something's grabbing you, and people have witnessed, even dogmen aggressively chasing them and leave, scratch marks down the car. Okay. But then there are some that you're kind of okay, yeah, see right there. There's just some that make it really, really difficult. So,
well, and I'm always open to having my cake and eating it too, So what I mean by that is, my good friend Mike Cleland has written books on UFOs and owls.
Oh, that'd be interesting.
It's not like Mike. It's not like Mike doesn't think owls are real. He realizes that there are real owls. There are real owls. Yeah. But he also is saying, hey, some of these owls are acting really strange around UFOs. Some of these owls seem to act in the behalf of the UFOs. So like there's two answers there, right? There's the real owls and then there's the weird owls. So like maybe there's the real Bigfoot and there's the weird Bigfoot.
Misidentification, maybe?
Well, misidentification or more, you mentioned screen memories, right? You mentioned screen memories.
Let's get into that.
Like, I mean, you mentioned screen memories. This isn't necessarily my stance, but like if the phenomenon, whatever you want to call it, if the phenomenon can choose to appear as the screen memory of an owl, they could choose to appear as the screen memory of a flesh and blood Bigfoot, I would assume, if they wanted to. Right?
Yeah.
So that's my have your cake and eat it too kind of idea. Although for me, like I've grown less patient with the idea of screen memories.
Okay.
Because I still don't quite. I have not satisfactorily had the mechanism by which they occur explained to me. And I think that the idea of a screen memory is the more comforting option. And what I mean by that is like, oh, the alien decided to appear like a postal worker. That's so much more comforting than the idea that, well, that's not a good example. Let's do a different example. An example I use in the book. I go to a diner and it's like this, it's like stepping back in time. It's like a 1950s diner and there's the sweetest waitress there and she takes care of me and I thought it was so awesome. I came back the next day and it wasn't there. It must have been a UFO screen memory.
Yeah, I've heard this.
That's the comforting version of that story, right?
Yeah.
The disturbing version of that story is that something about UFOs is so weird that it literally bends reality in its wake. There is a ripple that goes out from the UFO that literally distorts fact and fiction and time itself. Like that's the thing that would keep me up at night. It's a lot like, Michelle, it's a lot like people have been using this phrase, and I think it's a great phrase, but it's been overused. This phrase ontological shock, they've been using that a lot regarding the disclosure thing. And I think of extraterrestrials, and that's not ontological shock for me because I have a shelf in my head that's labeled alien invasion, and I'm just waiting to put I'm just waiting to put something up there. You know what I mean? I'm just waiting to put something on that shelf, right? I'm waiting to put something up there. I don't
think Blue Beam.
Well, right. But I don't have a space on the shelf for reality is completely malleable. I don't have a space on my shelf for fictions can come to life. Like that is true ontological shock for me. That's me saying I don't know what anything is. I don't know what reality is, right?
Right. That's a tough pill to swallow.
Well, and again, I hope that everybody who's listening realizes, like, I'm not saying that.
No.
I'm not saying that this is definitely what's going on. Like,
to digest it.
But I like to jump from thought experiment to thought experiment.
I think it's great.
And anyway, so it's just that would be a really disturbing, bizarre sort of thing. So
yeah, but it happens all the time. People. That they've got screen memories, MK Ultra, Montauk. I mean, there's so many different things out there that prove that this has happened to people. So, we're kind of sitting there going, so why not? Like,
well, and look, there are also, there are also clear precedents for that in, like, fairy folklore. Where the fairies use glamour to sort of cloak things and illusions. So I understand that. I'm always wary of something that seems like I can trace it back to a materialist interpretation of these phenomena. I'm always sort of wary of that. And to me, saying that so much just when you apply the term screen memory to every bit of high strangeness with too broad of a brush, I feel like you're sort of flattening out how weird these experiences can be, right? Like, oh, it's just a screen memory. Oh, well, everything's just a screen. Everything about it's just a screen.
We're having that right now.
Yeah. So that's sort of where I sort of come at it from at some point. So, but I do agree that there's something to that concept. It's just,
So what do you do when you're getting into folklore and oral history and legends? And I always look at legends personally as, I caught this fish And by the time it makes its way down the pipe, it's like this big behemoth of a fish. So it's just, you don't really know. But somewhere along the line, it starts with an experience.
Well, I heard that there is a school of folklore.
Yeah.
That there's a school of folklore that divides and distinguishes legends, fairy tales, and myths into their own categories. And what it is that a fairy tale is a fiction, and a myth is true, but not because it literally happened, but because the stories and the lessons encoded in them are true, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then the legend are the ones that are kind of like, well, I don't know, maybe it was literally true, maybe it's it's something in there in between, yeah.
Yeah.
And that's that's a fun way to look at it.
Yeah. I mean, we look at the ancient people, they immolated what they saw, whether through structures or cave art, petroglyphs, hieroglyphs, so I mean, what do you make of that? Like, it's got to come from someplace. There's got to be something.
Well, I mean, it's so interesting to me. So if you go to Brinaboyne in Ireland, and you look at sort of the flagstones around, I think it's around Nath. They've got these flagstones, and like you look at them, and they're all these shapes that are like spirals and like serpentine shapes and like starbursts and stuff. And you look at them for a while, and for me, I realized two things. I realized that one, like these are UFO shapes, right? They're shapes that you would see of things in the sky. But two, they're also these they're called entoptic phenomena, like entoptic shapes, which are the shapes that, if you rub your eyes really hard, you might see some of those shapes too. And I think it speaks to the fact that like there's probably something about these experiences that dive into that sort of altered state of consciousness sort of space.
Yeah.
But the other thing that I would suggest too is that, I think we underappreciate how much we are awash in just novelty and just new strange things. Like, who knows? Like, maybe if I wasn't drenched in seed oils and my brain wasn't irradiated with Wi-Fi, maybe I might see this stuff too. I'm saying that tongue in cheek a little bit, but I also mean that seriously. There's a great bit of correspondence between Tolkien and C.S. Lewis, where Tolkien suggests that the reason that people don't see the dryads and the nymphs and the fairies anymore, or as much anymore, is because they were no longer consuming food of the land, right? Because for a mid-century Brit, you were getting your tomatoes from Italy, and you were getting your jerky from Germany, and you're getting,
right.
And it's an even worse problem today, right? Like, I haven't eaten anything. You will eat one or two things local, and maybe you have your own garden. But the point stands that
we've been dumbed down, is what you're saying.
Well, no, I'm saying that we're not consuming things of the earth, and that was Tolkien's contention. Was that he was saying that once upon a time, everything that you ate probably came from within a 5-mile radius of where you lived.
Yeah, so you can add to that with microwave technology, frequency technology. That's kind of altering. I mean, we are energy, so when you have other energy interacting within our energy, that's going to change things up. So essentially, we're not able to tap in as easily.
Well, and if you're consuming, again, his argument was that if you're consuming stuff that is sort of local, you are imbibing and sort of becoming one with the land. And since so many of these, especially the fairy spirits were kind of genus loci, they were spirits of place, there was this idea that would maybe make you more likely to see them and to be able to apprehend them. Yeah.
Taking that stance, do you think everything that we see, or everything that even back then that we were able to see and interact with, do you think we were just able to see dimensionally speaking, like we can look into the dimensions, or we could freely, again, they could come in, we would just see them as they were right now? Oh, now we struggle because we have like a million satellites over the.
I think you're absolutely right. I think that something about this is something about the modern state is making this more difficult to see these things. And to your point, I've kind of wondered. I might have said this last time. I said this a couple of times. So if this sounds too familiar, stop and I'll just
okay.
Say,
We got a lot of people listening that may not have been here, so have at
fair
it.
enough. But I kind of sat down a while back and I'm like, why is it that when you look at West Virginia, you get like all these cryptid stories and these great UFO stories and some good ghost stories, and it seems like sometimes every little holler has its own critter, it has its own local monster. And it occurred to me that like the way that a lot of those communities in West Virginia, especially the ones in these hollers and such, are living is much more along the ways that we lived for centuries. And what I mean by that is that these are places where the internet is still spotty and where they don't have, back in the days of landlines, the landline might not work but 1 or 2 days a week. They are also living
more primitively.
Well, they're living alongside relatives, and they are, their kinfolk lived in the same holler. They're living communally with their neighbors, and they're more apt to borrow sugar and stuff. So I guess what I'm getting at is like that is a way of life that is more aligned with the way that we lived when we were experiencing this stuff all the time. So of course they experience this stuff more than we do.
I would agree with that because I've traveled many parts of the world, and I love going to places like the one I'll bring up right now is in the south of France. There was this tiny little town, 800 people, and it's within the Languedoc area. And there's a lot of little towns within the Languedoc area, and they're all like supercharged power spots. You just walk through these areas and you're buzzing, going, "Gee, look, what is up with this place?" But it's the energy is just so people, and they're all aware of it, and they all have their own gardens. Everything is natural, and everything is just so calm. I can't believe how calm things are in these towns, and they just like take life going to the beat of their own drum, and they'll take you to all the power spots. They'll tell you what happens at each of them. But when you are in a more populated area with technology and so on, I completely agree with you. It's a whole other how can you connect to something like that?
How do you find your power spot in Times Square or in Piccadilly Circus? You just don't. Which probably says something to do with the reason why we associate. I'm not entirely sure that this is true, but like while we associate the paranormal, a lot of paranormal / ufological / cryptid kind of things happening out in the wilderness, right? And again, I don't know that that's entirely true. John Lennon saw UFO above New York City, and I have stories of dumpster diving Sasquatch from Phoenix, Arizona. But like my point is that like people tend to expect those sort of things more out in the wilderness. So I think that you're absolutely right with that, and it kind of makes you wonder, what we've lost with DoorDash and 24-hour shopping from Amazon.
Yes. Well, you still have people who are living like when I was in Egypt. It's like people are still walking around with baskets on their head alongside the Nile, and they're living. And I'm looking at mud huts, going, people still live like this. And I mean, we're talking Cairo. It's not like we're talking down the river, And I'm thinking it's just like people. It's like stepping back in time. And with that, I believe comes everything else, all the bonuses of that, as much as the downfalls of it.
Oh, I would completely agree. I mean, again, everything has trade-offs, right? It's like the AI question, right? Everything has trade-offs. So I think that we're onto something. If only people would listen to you and me. We could have this whole paranormal question wrapped up.
Just sort it out.
Just go on your detox. Just go on your detox, and you'll experience this stuff. And I think that there's some other things, just being creatures of habit, that we sort of have ended up shunting this stuff from our lives. I mean, another good example, something I've been fascinated by, is this concept of second sleep, which was very common in like medieval Europe, where you would sort of wake up in the middle of the night, and everybody would kind of wake up around that sort of 3 a.m. time frame. And that was when you'd you'd just read for a little bit, or maybe you'd pop over to your next door neighbor and sort of visit with them for an hour, and then you'd come back to sleep. And, I've kind of been like, well, maybe that was also, sort of a defense mechanism for, it's better to be awake during the witching hour than asleep and vulnerable during the witching hour. But there are all these little things that, with the advance of the electronic bulb and, to say nothing of communications and the internet and stuff that have changed our lives a lot.
I've heard people talk about that, but waking up, let's say at even 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock in the morning, they stir around, they'll maybe go to the washroom, come back, get a drink of water. They lay back down and fall into these crazy deep sleeps. It happens to me all the time.
Oh,
and
yeah.
Craziest things happen. Visions.
It happened to me before I had twins. Let's put it that way.
It changes after that for sure.
Yeah. I mean,
but you notice how much more profound they are. And there's this belief that, no, you can communicate, that I guess because you never fall into the same sleep that you do at night for as long as you do, that you can remember these dreams or visions or communications that are taking place.
I mean, I've said that I think I get my best sleep between 5 and 10 a.m. That's when I really feel like I have the tendency to really be out to the world. It's everything before that I'm tossing and turning.
Yeah. So do you get those sort of dreams or visions? And
I don't have great dreams. They're not great. Number one, I remember very few of them. I've only had one or two that have, well, probably two that have really seemed interesting or symbolically profound. Most of the time it's I'm talking to my sister, who's also my middle school teacher, and she's wearing a hat made out of jam. And then we open
I'm dreaming about Yellowstone.
Yeah,
and more episodes the night before.
and then I turn around. And I'm no longer in the classroom. I'm on the Serengeti. It's just weird, just random stuff.
Weird stuff. But you ever break those down? Because sometimes those are the ones that they say if you break down your dreams, it'll give you your message.
No, I do have oddly specific. I have had the recurring teeth crumbling dream.
Yeah,
I've had it a lot. And then I also, Michelle, I'm a musician.
Yeah.
Part of the reason I'm exhausted is because Oktoberfest season has started here in September, and I play. Yeah, I know. I play tuba, and it's one of those things where it's like Mardi Gras and Oktoberfest season are my really busy seasons. But
yeah.
But I have a dream that my mouthpiece is melting. It just sort of crumples in on itself.
Wow.
I don't know. It's probably got to be a variation on that.
That's horrific as a musician who plays a tuba.
Yeah. I'm always like, okay, well, yeah, because a tuba mouthpiece. I mean, you're looking at a minimum of 120. To replace that.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's
you got to look at the significance. Now I'm going to have to go look that up.
Yeah, I think it's got to be a variation on the teeth crumbling thing, which I think I heard was giving up control or something like that. I'm not sure how that relates, but I have had I've had some pretty vivid teeth crumbling dreams where I fully expect to wake up with a mouthful of nothing.
Oh boy. Yeah. See, there's something to that. I find I will in that dream state tend to remember more than I would, let's say, throughout the night, like I'll say, God, do you remember any of your dreams? No. Yet
Right.
I could lucid dream like nobody's business before. I could fast forward, rewind, start over at the same place. Yeah. And then, like you say, you have children and it never happens again.
Right.
You never sleep again. One eye open all the time, even as adults. So
fair enough. Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah,
I've had a couple of odd ones. I had one that I don't really talk about too much.
Yeah.
It was probably around the time that I was writing Thieves in the Night. And we were living in this house that I kind of jokingly referred to as the tree house because it was a very vertically oriented house, right? It was a very small combined kitchen, dining room, living room on the bottom floor, and then everything else was upstairs, right? And I remember waking up in the middle of the night and going down to the bottom of the stairs, and there was this taller, dark brown beige entity. I can only really make her out very distinctly her. I could only make her out through like the corner of my eye if I'd turn. She had these wraparound eyes, and some two shorter entities. And I bowed down and I said, "Your Majesty." And then she took me back up to the bedroom and I got it back in bed, and I could feel the pressure of her getting back on the bed. And then I woke up.
Wow, crazy.
Creepy. Creepy.
Well, it is, but it makes you wonder, is it like a visitation? Is it, an ET experiences? It is a paranormal experience. Right. What is it exactly?
One of the things that I think is
everything we're talking about right now.
Well, one of the things that I think is important to acknowledge is, Carl Jung talked about this, and he borrowed it from the Elgoni people of Kenya. But there was this idea of big dreams versus little dreams. Mm-hmm. And the idea that there were these big dreams that were dreams for the collective, dreams for the community, and these little dreams that were more personal. But you could also sort of say big dreams versus little dreams in terms of like, there are big dreams that are like, oh, this is important. I'm more likely to remember this one. This feels thematically resonant. This feels, like it. And then little dreams, like the ones that I have with my sister wearing a hat made of jam and stuff.
Yeah.
So I don't think all dreams are created equal, right? Is what I'm trying to say.
No, the jam hat thing is kind of, that takes it from me though. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Astral projection or past life.
I mean, yeah, possibly.
I'm
very sympathetic to the idea that even though mine don't seem especially significant, or I don't remember them very often, I'm very sympathetic to the idea that we go someplace in our dreams. Very much.
I would have to agree with you. I don't think that we just stay in our bodies and slumber. I believe that our essence wouldn't do that. It would be like me going to sleep in the car in the garage, like when I go to bed at night. It just wouldn't make any sense. We just go. But what are your thoughts on let's say past lives, bleeding into this theory that you're talking about?
Well, I would say that, from the start,
reincarnation,
I'm very sympathetic to the idea of reincarnation. The work of Ian Stevenson and Jim Tucker from the University of Virginia is incredibly compelling. It doesn't get quite as much love as the near-death experience stuff does, but I think it should, because it's some really good stuff that they've looked into. And I think that a lot of the boring, materialist, skeptical counterpoints to it, like, oh, well, why are there more people now than ever on Earth? Well, it's like, how many waves can be on the ocean, you dingus? It's like, why are you, you know what I'm saying? Like, it's the same question, right? If we're all sort of one consciousness, there can be a lot of waves on the ocean. There can be a lot of people on Earth, sort of concrescences of consciousness. Why did you go to a past life regression and everybody's Cleopatra? I don't know. Maybe we all got like maybe Cleopatra's soul split into 900 pieces. And,
maybe it's just a collective consciousness thing. It's all imprinted in all of us.
Yeah. So in other words, I guess what I'm saying is that, like, oh, well, why do ghosts exist if reincarnation exists? Well, you're assuming that it's instantaneous and one-to-one. Like, maybe that's a part of maybe that's the ego of the person that gets stuck on here as a ghost, and the rest of themselves transcends. Or maybe it takes a while. Maybe there's a waiting period where any number of things, right? So I think a lot of the skeptical logic traps that they put you in, it's just like, get out of here with that. So I guess I'm getting around to it. I promise. I'm getting
no, it's okay. Take your time. Take your time.
So yeah, I'm really sympathetic to the past life stuff. Some of it does get old that, a lot of people seem to always be somebody famous or important, like that's kind of like, it's kind of cringy. But, having said that, I think that, I'm sympathetic to, not even necessarily in terms of the dream life being a past life, but maybe being like a parallel life, right? Like a life that the mirror side of whatever I'm doing here, right? Where they think it's completely normal that my sister wears a jam hat because on the Serengeti, right?
Maybe she is.
And where they're like, oh, it's so weird. He sat in front of this glowing screen all day and it was awful.
What about living multiple lives simultaneously, where the like you say, the soul splits?
Well, I mean, so here's an idea. We were talking sort of about retrocausality and stuff and how that could work. And one of the things that that Eric Wargo talks about is this idea, and Mike Masters talks about it too when he's talking about the idea of aliens being future versions of us, is that there are no paradoxes or anything like that because it's a block universe, right? So like we live in an every win. I hate to say it because it sounds so tired, but it really is everything everywhere all at once, right?
Yes.
And so like in that case, I mean, we're always in a simultaneity, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah. No.
Well, and to that extent too, like seeing that last comment.
Well, this one, yeah,
yeah. Seeing that, I saw the one that you were laughing at. But seeing that last comment, like I'm also not sure that we don't have like little pieces of ourselves, that we aren't like a mycelial fungus network, of people, and not saying that I've got a little bit of me in everybody, but like maybe the people that I find throughout my life, we all share little pieces of each other.
Yeah. Comment here too. Tessa talks about frequency, energy, vibration. Can you explain how these factor into past lives or dream yoga, which is the ability to be fully conscious and awake within your dreams?
Well, there was an interesting study. I mean, I can't really speak to dream yoga because I stick with routines like that for about a week and a half, But the idea of frequency and vibration, I found something that's really interesting, which is that give me a second to make sure I get this right. But there's the issue of sleep paralysis, which I always found sort of frustrating whenever it's sort of brought up as an explanation to the UFO contact / alien abduction thing, because it doesn't seem like a good fit, right? You're pressed down in sleep paralysis, and you're not being lifted up. It's a completely different sort of thing. I mean, it's got some similarities, but I don't think it's quite the right match. But there were some researchers who found that low amplitude electrical stimuli applied to the vestibular cortex of the brain evoked those sinking or falling sensations that were consistent with sleep paralysis. And higher currents induced things like autoscopy, so seeing yourself, and out-of-body experiences. And what's interesting to me is when you look at the sort of characters that populate those two spaces, the sleep paralysis space and the astral projection space, the out-of-body experience space, the sleep paralysis entities are kind of negative, right? Yes. And the ones that you're more likely to encounter in out-of-body experiences are more positive, right? And what would a new ager tell us about these entities? Oh, the negative ones are low vibrational and the positive ones are high vibrational. And so that seems to correspond to that information, right? Like your low amplitude stimuli, sleep paralysis, lower vibrational beings. Higher amplitude stimuli, out of body experience, higher vibrational beings. So I kind of wonder if there's something that can be taken a little bit more literally about those concepts, if you look at it that way.
That's definitely an interesting thought. It is. It's definitely an interesting thought. I truly believe in the whole energy thing. I think it pretty much is the basis to everything. I mean, when you factor in that we're made up of energy, that we can easily, I mean, how many people can affect, you're walking down the street and you can just affect the street lights just going down, just turning off. Like, I mean, without not even consciously aware that they're doing it.
Right.
Like there's something to that.
Or even something as simple as the law of conservation of energy, which is, which is a law until, you ask the skeptic what happens to consciousness after death, and they're like, well, I don't know, not then. And it's like, well, come on. You've set this up and it seems to apply in every other situation. Why doesn't it apply to what happens to us?
I do. I don't know. I just think that there's so much to manifestation, and people just like, oh, you can manifest your reality. Okay, wait a minute. Oh, this stuff is happening. We can manifest, Like somehow there's this phenomenon that's just taking Superman out of our heads and just like, hey, there's Superman, but we can't manifest our own reality that easily.
Granted, that's like it's like Olympic level manifestation. I mean, but look, I just manifested something. I manifested picking up my phone. That's but that's true. That's true. I had a thought, and it was a thought that was in indeterminacy and in potentiality until I decided to do something about it, and then I manifested it. So everything around us testifies to the fact that the ideas that I sort of end up talking about in Fourth Wall Phantoms, they are true on at least a minor level that we can control. So what happens when you interface that with people who are more talented at that, latently talented at that? What happens? Can you have a character come to life?
How do you separate them? How do you separate all of this fact and fiction, or in this case, fiction from fact?
Right. Yeah.
Right.
No, and if you look at the people who are able to, so sometimes we do the best. Sometimes we're most effective when we're not trying to be, or when we're not thinking about it. When we're just sort of letting that other part of ourselves take over. So what happens when we apply that to something like the creative process? Or are there some among us who, without even trying to be, can make these miraculous things happen? Yeah, I don't know. Maybe
it's like the space in between, fact and fiction. Like what happens in there?
Yeah, that sort of that liminal space. I mean, so one of the things that I think is kind of we might want to sort of bring back up here is that so the reason that the book is called Fourth Wall Phantoms is because the fourth wall and breaking the fourth wall is a reference to anytime a character interacts with the audience, right? Or a narrator interacts with the audience or something like that. It's this idea from theater that there are three walls and then there's an invisible fourth wall between the characters / actors and the audience. And so a lot of these sort of stepping off the page or stepping out of films into real life, those would be kind of like fourth wall breaks. What's interesting about this is that if you look at narratologists, they actually refer to this concept as metalepsis. And the reason that they use that term is because there are a lot of different variations on it. You can have narrators that interact with characters. You can have characters that interact with readers, narrators that interact with readers. There's a lot of different variations on it. So anytime that you're sort of violating those hierarchies of reality and with a fictional text, that's called metalepsis. And what I found as I looked more and more into that is that it's like the best, it's the best metaphor for experiencing the paranormal. Like, you can read these texts on metalepsis, these kind of dry narratological texts discussing metalepsis, and you can sub out the supernatural and like, it's the same thing, once characters break the fourth wall, they might have existential crises, or they might find it absurd. But the main point is that, like, oftentimes the act of breaking the fourth wall it's an empowering thing, right? Because they know that they can violate the boundaries and the rules of their own reality. And that's exactly what happens with the paranormal. They're interacting with something outside the frame of existence, and they're realizing that they can sort of play the game of being in the story, right? And the moment that this really hit home for me, where I was like, oh, it sounds like there is something to this concept, is when I was reading about ancient Greek vases. And if you ever think about these, usually the characters are in profile, right, on an ancient Greek vase. That's the way that they're always shown. There are exceptions to this, though. And the exceptions are characters that are facing the viewer of the vase. And, art scholars say that this is one of the earliest depictions of metalepsis, because the character is looking at the viewer, right? Whoever's looking at the vase. And the characters that seem to most often face the viewer, the characters that engage in fourth wall breaking on Greek vases, are sleepers, the dead, those in altered states of consciousness, gods and goddesses, and monsters.
Why?
And I'm like,
Yeah.
That's the list. That's the list. That's the list of paranormal suspects, right? Sleepers, the dead, altered states of consciousness, gods and goddesses, and monsters. And so, like, that to me was like, oh, there is something to this concept. And it even gets driven more home when you look at people have talked about the trickster and the archetype of the trickster and the paranormal, and that's what the trickster does. The trickster violates those boundaries, right?
Yes.
There's a reason that Deadpool is so popular, because Deadpool's a trickster, and he also is breaking the fourth wall all the time. The trickster is like the patron saint of metalepsis, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so it makes complete sense that this concept of beholding a reality beyond this reality, of that component of breaking the fourth wall, would be applicable to the paranormal. So yeah, it was kind of the gift that keeps on giving, and I will say that's one concept that I'm going to have trouble not looking at the paranormal through that lens, because it's been so rewarding so far.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. I always think, when I discussing all of this, I always think of Dorian Gray.
Yeah, that's a good one too. Yeah.
Yeah, there's this, like, how does this, if you think about it, how does this painting keep aging? And as long as it exists, then the human continues to thrive and stay young. How does, how
yeah,
how does it go?
Yeah, no, that's a great example, and it kind of makes you think again about these haunted paintings and stuff. You're like, the idea is like, oh, there must be a ghost attached to the painting. But what if you're like, maybe that's too complicated. Maybe it's just the subject in the painting has a life of its own, right?
Yeah.
And that's what's taking on a life, and interacting with me. And that's the reason its eyes follow me. It's not because the painting is haunted, but the painting is a haunting,
Yes. Well, yeah. I mean, how many times do you get that phenomenon when you are, you're just walking, in places where they have paintings in museum? I have had that feeling before, kind of going, is it looking at me?
And this is the same thing that, like, this is the same thing that we're talking about at the top of the show was, these characters that come to life, And so I think that that's kind of what a spiritual revelation is, right? Is you see beyond those boundaries.
Yeah. He says, as a painting, what if the painting was infused with the energies of the painter?
Well, I think that's a good point. That's probably something to touch on too, is I think that you hear something over and over again whenever people have these experiences, near-death experiences, alien abductions, some cryptid accounts, trips to fairyland. Time and again, they'll say things like, "Oh, it defies language," or "I can't put it into words," or like, "It doesn't. Words will never suffice to describe what I saw," or like, "I can't even describe it."
Mm-hmm.
I hear that a lot. And we have something that does that. It's called art. We have something that does those things. We have something that says what words can't, right? Even a book, I would argue, is kind of greater than the sum of its parts in that regard, right? A book is through words, but it says more than words.
Music. Yeah, a lot of
music. Yeah. And this is the way that people have talked about art, right? They say that, art it conveys things that words can't convey. And I've started to suspect that, like, the shamanic space is the near-death experience space, is the UFO space, is the artistic space. Because you look at how many people come back from NDEs and alien abductions with a burst of creativity. I mean, it happens a lot.
Mm-hmm.
It really does happen a lot. So I think that maybe, like, that artistic space is that same space that of all this. And in that case, it would mean kind of that when you die, you go to, like, the hub of the artistic world, which is kind of beautiful, I think.
Well, technically, music is supposed to be the universal language.
And the music of the spheres, right? So it's, I like this. And again, I don't know how literal I don't even know how much I buy this stuff that I'm saying, right? I just like the ideas of this stuff.
Yeah, I love that. John says, if God is pure awareness, the ground of all consciousness, then the Jungian archetypes like the hero, the shadow, or the wise old man, merely products of a collective unconscious, or do they reflect eternal patterns rooted in God's own creative design, glimpses of the divine archetype in which all souls participate?
Yeah, I'm not sure, because part of me wants to say that they're those eternal patterns. I'm really sympathetic to that, but at the same time, I have to, if I'm sort of occupying this thesis point for Fourth Wall Phantoms, I have to say to myself, well, I think that given enough time, new archetypes can kind of be created. I mean, so Jung used this example among many, but he used an example that archetypes were sort of like dried riverbeds, and like they might go dry, but like whenever it rains, it's going to follow that path, right?
Yeah.
And so like I don't know if a good example is the UFO, right? I mean, is the flying saucer, is the UFO an archetype? I don't know. It might be on its way to becoming one. I can say this. I can say that it definitely like has a lot of archetypes within it, right? It has the mandala, it has the protective circle, it has the psychopomp's boat, it has all these sort of different archetypes within it, but I'm not sure if it in and of itself is an archetype. So that's a good question. Are we sort of creating this stuff through the collective unconscious, or was the unconscious always there? I want it to be always there, but I'm open to it not being that case.
Yeah. So
great question.
Yeah. So in lending towards how sometimes as a writer, the characters speak to you, Wayne is saying, when readers write to me about reading my books, many times over, I'm told that they could feel everything from the weather to the fear to the tragic losses because I feel what I write. So, how, I guess, a transference.
Yeah, I mean, you're putting that part of yourself into it, which is sort of where I meant to go when I was rambling on about that artistic space. It's like I call artists, Prometheus with a paintbrush, because they're bringing back a spark of that divine thing and putting it into their art. And like, I'm not saying that everybody can do that. I'm not sure that I can do that, but I'm saying, that people who, like Wayne, that can do that. When you can do that, it truly is. It practically is magic, right? In a lot of ways.
Yeah.
And this has been talked about. This idea of like literally feeling things from characters to that degree has been talked about a lot, and it's been.
So, do you manifest the character?
Well, I mean, it depends on who you ask. Jung was talking about sitting in a play at one point, and he saw the character get stabbed, and he was so invested that he felt a heart pang. Flaubert and Madame Bovary had a character poisoned, and he got like food poisoning that night. So I probably, or if you look at this sort of through like to sort of get a little bit deeper in the philosophical weeds, if you look at this as like something like the concept of monism, the concept that everything is everything, and there aren't any real distinctions between you and me, or art and fiction, or any of these things, and like, we're manifesting it because we are it.
Yeah, that's a tough one. John goes on to say, how can we confine God's creative ability?
Well, it reminds me of one of my favorite answers to an interview question. And I think this is not unique to this particular interview. I think it was somebody else probably said it. But I thought it was a great answer. The question was, how big is your God? And the answer was, if I could tell you how big my God was, he wouldn't be my God, right? So
right.
I definitely sympathize with that.
Yeah. Wayne goes on to say, I believe that once I open the door to a character, that character will often tell me, sometimes with force, what or how they wish to be portrayed.
Yeah, I had something similar with my novel. I won't say it was quite like that, but my editor, upon reading it, was like, this character doesn't sound like they should in this chapter. And I was like, okay, well, I guess I'll rewrite it. And when I sat down to rewrite it, it was like, oh, it wasn't like, oh, you got this wrong, Josh. It was more like, oh, the transmission was garbled. You were tuned into the wrong channel that day because it just
so
came.
the character took over.
Yeah, it just came right out. Yeah, it
Wow.
it totally happens, and it's a weird thing.
Yeah.
Again, unless you've had it happen to you, it's hard to describe, but it is a thing, and I guess the fact that, like I said, there are, authors who are complete non-believers in anything paranormal who also experience this suggests that there really is something legitimate to it. There really is something to that idea.
Mm-hmm. I mean, again, it sort of leans back to a question that I addressed before, but maybe like, what if essentially there is, a spiritual being on the other side that just comes forward and says, write my story based on this? Like, is it, again, chicken or the egg? Like, what?
Yeah, and again, like I where do ideas? That's the real question. Where do ideas come from?
Yeah.
And this is sort of the question that this is the biggest issue, and I think he plans on addressing it. And again, I don't want to sound too negative, because I really love Eric Wargo's work, but
Mm-hmm.
with his idea of these time loops and this retrocausality, it never really tells you where the initial inspiration comes from, right?
Mm.
So in other words, I am struggling with a math problem, and some mysterious, handsome stranger comes back to me and gives me the solution. And then later I invent a time machine and go back in time and give myself the answer to the math problem, right? It's a bootstrapping paradox.
Yeah.
Where does the answer to the math problem come from? Because I gave it to myself. And it's the sort of thing where it's like, I think Eric would say that it comes from nowhere. It comes from the middle of that time loop. But to me, this answer is all over creation stories, right? Like the number of creation stories that describe the world being spoken into reality, or the world being thought into reality, or the world being painted or sung into reality. There's a lot of those.
Mm-hmm.
And it really does get back to sort of the opening question that we were talking about with, the fact that we unlocked artificial intelligence with large language models and language itself. Like there's something really powerful about language, I think.
Yeah. So is there something going into the collective consciousness as well? Because we do pick up from that. And how do we know that some of these beings, like most people look at the collective consciousness and think humanity, it's our collective consciousness.
Yeah.
There's a lot of stuff on this planet, and there are other beings that we are, probably will never scratch the surface of, but and then never mind the dimensional or the ethereals. Like, I mean, there could be so many going into the collective consciousness, and whose thoughts are you picking up?
I mean, I think that's sort of what you wind up at is like, you can't say much for certain, but what you can say is that like your ideas are not your own. Like, and again, you talk to a lot of creative folks and they'll tell you this, like, it's not, this is not my idea. Like so this is when I realized that Google was truly worthless nowadays, because I looked hard as I could for this particular anecdote to include in the book, and I couldn't find it, even though I swore I read it. Mm-hmm. But there was a story or an interview with Ray Bradbury that I read where he was talking about, every now and then he'd wake up in the small hours of the morning and come down to his library and open up one of his books and just sort of weep. And he would just because he wouldn't know, he would just be like, where did this come from? Like, he's like, it didn't come from me. I'm just
like, he's channeled it.
Yeah. He's like, I'm just blessed enough. He probably wouldn't use that language, but he's like, I'm just blessed enough to like sort of be intercepting it, to put it into work onto the paper, get it out there and make a life of it.
Yeah.
So yeah, there is definitely that sense that if not, I mean, like, obviously I'll claim my crappy ideas, right? Like, but I will say that my best ideas do not feel like they come from me. They really don't.
Yeah. I think that's wonderful, though. I think it leaves room for growth, to expand on some of those ideas. Do you find, since writing the book, that you've had more come to you? Because I can't see you writing a book like this and not having more come to you.
Well, it was sort of it was, speaking of chickens and eggs, like you kind of got it backwards a little bit. So
whatever.
Well, okay. So there are a couple ways to think about this. The
Egg,
first one
chicken,
was that,
any
like,
way you want to do it.
that's one of the ways that's one of the reasons that I wrote my novel, is so I could kind of
Yeah.
have experiences like this. And I did have some experiences like this, nothing this dramatic, but some experiences like this while writing my novel. There are a couple of moments when, like, I would worry about a plot point all day, and then I'd start to go to sleep, and, like, in that time between falling asleep and getting to sleep, I would have the answer, the perfect answer, and I'd be like, I've got to get up and I have to write it down. It's just really obnoxious, right? So there's some of that. I will say that there is an aspect of fourth wall phantoms, and honestly, it's kind of paid off a little bit. That is a giant, sort of a giant ritual, and what I mean by that is that I've always, in my other works, I've really avoided using my own voice. There's not a lot of or my opinions or stuff, in a lot of my other books. But in this one, I went ahead and jumped in for a couple of different reasons, not the least of which was it's thematically on brand, right? Breaking the fourth wall and talking about yourself. But part of it too was, if I'm going to sit here and say that I think engaging the paranormal is like that fourth wall breaking, is like that metalepsis. John Keel called it the reflective factor. You look at the phenomenon looks back at you.
Yeah.
If I am going to sit here and say that, then I also can't complain about not having enough experiences and leaving myself out of my work. Like, right, I've got to put myself in it so that things start happening to me. And I've had some interesting things happen since the book. Nothing, I haven't seen Bigfoot didn't walk down my stairs or anything. Nothing that dramatic, but
yeah.
Some interesting things have happened. I've been on a couple of ghost hunts since then, and some head scratchers. Let's put it that way.
Head scratchers are good. It's always a good beginning,
Yeah.
So what do you have coming up? Do you have another book? Do you have any conferences? What do you got coming up?
Right now. Right
Taking
now,
a break?
yeah. Right now I'm. You'll find me playing tuba twice every weekend at random places. No. So let's see. I'm currently working on a course for the California Institute of Integral Studies, but that's already closed and whatnot. I guess the next thing that's happening is in December. I am going to be at the Esalen Institute in Big Sur. That is December 5th through 7th. And you can find out more about that at my website, joshuacutchin.com. I'll be workshop assistant for Kevin Can and Dr. Jeffrey Kripal's event there at Esalen. And I'm really excited about that. Getting a chance to go to Esalen has been something of a bucket list item for me. So
that's awesome.
So that's the main thing that I'll be. I think that's the only thing that I've got between now and the end of the year, besides playing tuba and I am working on a couple of other book projects, but nothing will be out for a while. It's gonna be
yeah. Oh, well, I hope you will keep the show in mind when you.
Absolutely.
It would be fantastic. You, like I was saying, have an open door policy, and time would come on and say, I want to talk about something. Okay.
Well, you're fun and gracious, and so is your audience. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much for joining us. Guys, thank you all for being just fantastic in the chat room. Great questions, great comments. Tomorrow night, we bring on Stephen Bissett, who's going to be catching us up on the latest congressional UFO ET disclosures, his thoughts on the 31 Atlas, the Boogospheres, much more. So it's going to be very, he's just right to the point. So we're not going to be messing around. So thank you all, and we shall see you all tomorrow evening. Thank you, Joshua.
Thank you.